He is one of the great characters of British wrestling. There's a triumvirate. It's Big Daddy, it's Giant Haystacks, and it's Kendo Nagasaki.
For me, that broke through, obviously, so it was one of the big three,
I think if tomorrow Paddy McGuinness, on an episode of Take Me Out, said to someone who just, like, I don't know, stomped in or whatever they do, if he said the line, "Who do you think you are, Kendo Nagasaki?" it would be the biggest catchphrase of the year. People would all be going, "Yeah, who do you think you are, Kendo Nagasaki?"
Yeah.
It's a lovely, lovely word to say. Kendo is, of course, most famous for his mask. He is a classic mask wrestler. Throughout his career, people were desperate to see his face. That is really it. He also didn't speak.
For a bit.
He didn't ever speak. He never got on the mic. He always had a manager who would speak for him.
Easy job. Good
he was
job.
An exciting mystery, wasn't he? Because you also were like, is he Japanese? Is he not? Is he hideously scarred? There was lots of talk about, was he a member of the royal family back in the sort of 70s and 80s?
I love stuff like that. Where it's like, have a think about what that would mean.
Yeah. I mean, there is a funny thing about, when you sort of go, member of the royal family, what are they going to be doing? Picking up 30 quid, for going to bloody Wigan. The reality is, we'll get to it, but the actual real story of Kendo Nagasaki is stranger in a way than all of the stuff that was guessed about him, which is just, it makes it even better. He was also, because he was very much into the character, he didn't really sort of socialise outside wrestling.
Right.
So he never really revealed who he was. The other wrestlers knew, but he also was a very private man. And so he didn't really sort of have that thing where people are like, I would drink him with a fella. He's Kendo Nagasaki. He's all right. He's got his own, roofing business. There was none of that. He just sort of existed outside of the system. He debuted in like November 1964, which is, it just seems like so long ago now. It really does. And he became a household name after his TV debut, which happened in 1971. He'd had some tours of Japan. He went under the name. He was always Kendo Nagasaki.
Right.
He went to Japan, and I think he thought, and we'll get to the reasons why. What it is, I think he thought it would be dishonourable. And so he took the name Mr. Guillotine.
Mr. Guillotine? Look. Come on.
There is a thing where I go,
that a lot.
We forget about these things. Kendo Nagasaki, the wrestler, came up with the name Kendo Nagasaki, which is such a good name that you would hear it 60 years after he came up with it, and people would go, "Oh yeah, Kendo Nagasaki."
Yes.
It's like coming up with the name Coca-Cola. He did that. He came up with Mr. Guillotine as well. And, that in itself is also the best name ever. The guy was a fucking genius. He returns to Britain. Between 75 and 77, he has a long feud with the tag team of Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks. So Kendo was the evil one, and they were teaming. Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks would then have their own big feud and thing. Right. What it did was it set him as one of the three biggest stars in British wrestling. Those guys were huge, larger-than-life characters. And Kendo Nagasaki is every bit as spectacular a wrestling character, just because of the way he presents himself. Yeah. He was very good in the ring as well. He did have matches where he would lift up Big Daddy onto his shoulders and do his finishing move, which was the kamikaze roll, where he'd basically do a sort of like a forward roll with Daddy on his shoulders, so he would then roll over him. It was supposed to look devastating. It never quite looked devastating. It looked a bit like if you got two kids in a high school gym and you were sort of saying, right, the next one, you put them on your thing, and that person, if they roll, you'll roll back. It looked a bit like that. Yeah. It was sort of quite a gentle move. Yeah. Now, Kendo Nagasaki's identity for many, many, many decades was a very, very guarded secret within wrestling. There were lots and lots of rumours about him, which circulated. He was missing a finger, and that showed that he was a member of the Yakuza. He had tattoos all over his head, they said, because it was some kind of mystical gangster organisation he was affiliated with. He was gay, people said, and that his flamboyant manager, Gorgeous George Gillette, was actually his lover. Right. They said he was a martial arts Zen master, that he was a very wealthy property developer. He was a master of judo. He could do long-range healing, and that he was a leading chiropractor.
That last one sounds about right.
All of them were true.
Oh, really?
All of them were true, apart from the fact he wasn't gay, he was bisexual. And his missing finger was not because he was a Yakuza. He lost it in an accident while he was working as an apprentice at Jennings, the horsebox manufacturers in Crewe.
Back when he was a van rat.
A Van Weasel.
Van Weasel.
Max Crabtree, who was a referee promoter and the brother of Big Daddy, he said, Kendo lived in a most beautiful house with about an acre of garden in Wolverhampton, worth about £300,000, beautifully furnished. He'd been very lucky. He had an adopted aunt, or she'd adopted him, who had a few properties up and down the country in Blackpool and the Midlands. When she died, Kendo got the lot, which would give him a lot of independence. It's one of those fairy tale stories. We'd all like to have an auntie like that. So Kendo had been left quite a big property portfolio, which he continued to manage during the day. And he did very, very well for himself in business. It is strange. Shawn Michaels, and this is a brilliant story, but in 1996, Shawn Michaels, he was left $2.5 million by a fan who he'd never met.
Oh my days, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's Shawn Michaels.
He got left that.
What part of Shawn Michaels' character?
In 1997.
In 1997, would you say, I think he needs this?
Completely. There was a big thing about this story got out, and people began, at press conferences, they'd say, I saw you got this $2.5 million thing, is that? And Shawn Michaels would just shut it down. I am not going to be talking about any of this. He definitely got given $2.5 million just by a fan.
That's brilliant.
Where's that fan now? Where's that fan of Wrestle Me? Jesus. I mean, God knows what Shawn Michaels would have done with $2.5 million in 1997, but I imagine quite a lot of it was converted late night. Who knows? But he was unmasked in 1977. He decided to unmask voluntarily, which is a strange thing to do. They had a great big ceremony. It was a big hit on TV, and his mask came off, and he had these sort of red and black contact lenses, and he had this ponytail, and he had a sort of tattoo on his head of a sort of I can't even remember what it is, but it's an amygdala or something like that.
Right.
It's one of those sort of Zen Buddhist tattoos. So he, in fairness to him, he does have a face a bit like Paul Putner, the actor. But he also looked very, very alien and strange as a result of, the way he done himself up.
Yeah, I mean, so he's got the John Marga haircut.
Yeah.
And when he gets unmasked, and you're like, well, look, fair dues. He's walking around with that on his head.
And the funny thing about it is, as we will find out, that Kendo is probably as close to the real man who portrays Kendo as it is to the character of the mysterious Kendo Nagasaki. I personally am invested very much in the mystery of Kendo Nagasaki because I saw him wrestle in the early 90s. And when we went out to the car park, my friend had just passed his driving test. When we went out to the car park, he was getting into a car with his mask still on.
Right.
And we'd sort of been hanging around going, we'll see what he looks like when he comes out. Yeah. We had no idea he'd been, unmasked. In 1990, there was no way of looking at old wrestling or even finding out about British wrestling. How would we? There's no internet, there's no history.
Yeah.
So he got into the car with the mask on. My friend said, should we just drive alongside them? And we'll then...
See if he ever takes the mask off.
We'll see what it looks like when he takes the mask off. So we drove out of Boreham Wood and we were going towards Potter's Bar. That is not an important part of the story. And we pulled up alongside the car as it got to some lights, and Kendo Nagasaki still had the mask on. So we pulled back a bit. Anyway, we carried on following them. And eventually they cottoned on, as they probably did at every single wrestling event they went to. There'd always be someone who was following a bit. Yeah. And the car just began drifting into our lane so that my friend, who's literally been driving for about 3 weeks, had to put on the brakes. And that was a sort of, that's your lot, lads. And we were just thrilled by it. We were like, Kendo Nagasaki tried to
run
us. Amazing.
Run us off the road.
His identity had been revealed once, and that was in the 1970s by a plumber who visited his house. So it's winter. They have a leak in the bathroom. George, who actually lived with Kendo at this time, looked in the yellow pages for a plumber. He finds one, the guy comes round and George opens the door. I think this is the late 70s. Now, the plumber turns out to be a wrestling nut. Much to the plumber's amazement, he turns up at this house, and there in front of them is the great hero manager, George Gillette. The plumber doesn't say anything, so he goes in and George says, "Peter, the plumber's here." The guy reading the newspaper on the couch is Kendo Nagasaki without his mask. The plumber puts 2 and 2 together. He realises he's seen the real McCoy, and he's got the name of the resident of the house, Peter Thornley, because they'd given that to pay the bill. One night soon, we're in the Civic Hall, Wolverhampton. Peter's on the bill, and in the dressing room, one of the wrestlers comes lounging in, I think it's bomber Pat Roach, and says, "Max, there's 2 fellows at the door giving out these bloody leaflets." I say, let's have a look. And it says on one, "The wrestler Kendo Nagasaki is Peter Thornley, and he lives at this address." I thought, them bastards, where the hell are they? So I shoot to the front door, and the 2 guys must have known I had something to do with it, because they throw the leaflets up in the air and go racing down the road. This guy and his friend became a bloody nuisance. Kendo would have murdered the bastard, killed him, but he couldn't do because he had all this heat on him, the star of the show. He can't go running down the high street with his samurai sword. It didn't end there. The fellow decided he'd invest all of his money, not just in printing leaflets. He knew we advertised in the local paper, the Express and Star. So when the advertisement for a Kendo Nagasaki bout appeared in the paper, underneath it would be a smaller advert that this plumber had paid for. Please note that the above wrestler, Kendo Nagasaki, is Peter Thornley and lives at this address.
Why was he doing this?
It was a big mystery.
Yeah.
People loved the solving of the mystery.
Wow.
Enough was enough. The plumber ended up in the local magistrate's court. We got his address and put an injunction on him to stop him doing it again. He doesn't turn up at court. He sends a letter in and says he's very, very sorry it won't happen again. Amazing.
What I like about that plumber is that he completely missed the Kendo Nagasaki lives with a guy. Just like completely misses that. Completely misses that and just goes, oh, I've got him. I've got him now.
It made headlines again in 2002 when his name was revealed during a court case over a land dispute with his neighbour. I mean, but even in 2002, people are like, I'm fascinated with who Kendo Nagasaki is.
Is Kendo Nagasaki still with us?
He is, yeah.
Oh,
He was born Peter Thornley. He was born in
Not you as well. Get out!
I am that plumber. He was born in 1946 in Stoke-on-Trent. He, despite being unveiled, he never ever spoke about being Kendo Nagasaki until the publication of his autobiography in 2018. I've read the book. It's a very big, thick book, and it's both absolutely brilliant and a little bit not what you'd expect. He does believe that Kendo Nagasaki exists, and that he believes he is not Kendo Nagasaki, but he is also possessed by Kendo Nagasaki. It's so strange to talk. I'll just basically break it down. His official website says that the Nagasaki character is in fact a spirit guide and sensei who appears by being channeled through an otherwise ordinary man, i.e. Peter Thornley. He also goes by the name Yagensha Peter. This is so confusing. At the height of his career, he did an interview with the TV Times in 1976. He said that the Nagasaki character was the spirit of a samurai warrior who 300 years ago lived in the place that is now called Nagasaki, and that Peter Thornley had come into contact with him while in a trance state during meditation. There is a meditation CD that he's put out that you can buy, which is just helps you to do meditation. I'm not sure whether it's just music.
Yeah, or him talking, because I would very much like to hear him talking.
You can hear him talk. You can also book him to do after dinner speaking, really? Where he will talk.
I've been to lots and lots of wrestling shows, you see. 95% of the wrestlers just waddled in a dressing gown and a pair of trunks, and they were very boring until they started the match. I wanted Kendo to be sensational from the moment you see him. So whenever Kendo's there, people go, what's that? You know? And so I, with the meditation, Kendo created the Kendo Nagasaki. And Kendo then started to take over my life.
In the book, he came out as being bisexual. He said, by the time I became a TV star back in 1972, I'd had a few flings with other men, but there was no way Kendo Nagasaki, the macho bad boy of wrestling, could tell his story back then. People would never have accepted it. Thank goodness we live in different times. I hope my story helps others be the best they can be, like I've always tried to be, and that my fans understand and stick by me because they mean the world to me.
What an inspirational...
He is. I mean, if he was not a wrestler, but was a performance artist, people would genuinely go, he is one of the great artists of the 20th century. The fact that he did all of this for no critical acclaim, and he just did it to make those people in Hull go, oh, that was a brilliant night out. But inside, he is living this rich Zen life of seeing himself as being possessed by the spirit of a 300-year-old samurai warrior. And that's seeming to give him great success in business as well. It is just, he uses a lot of his after dinner speaking is about the secrets of success. I imagine they're just like, you need to find a 300-year-old samurai spirit. That is number one. How much more fucking interesting could you be?
Yeah.
How much more interesting could, you know... Oh, by the way, also worth mentioning, he's had a very long friendship with the artist Peter Blake. They did a brilliant episode in 1991 of Arena, where Peter Blake tried to get to the bottom of the enigma of Kendo Nagasaki. He's painted him numerous times. He is one of two wrestlers whose painting is in the Royal Albert Hall. I mean, it is just an unbelievable life that he has had. And I just think he might just be the sort of most interesting, famous person that there's ever been on the face of the earth. Who do you think you are? Kendo Nagasaki!
Oh, my word.
I love Kendo Nagasaki.